And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Okay, Tuesday morning's flying weather. IFR, the next front pushing into the western Aleutians here. Marginal VFR eastward to the Pribilof, southward to the Alaska Peninsula. IFR here, Kodiak Island, northeast Bristol Bay, right on up in toward the western Cook Inlet area and along the North Gulf Coast into the northern Panhandle here. Good VFR in the interior, especially the northern Bering Sea, right on down into Togiak Bay, Dillingham, eastward there north of the Alaska Range. Some marginal VFR slipping a little north of the range here on the east side, but staying south of Eagle. And for the afternoon, you can see this system in the front pushes IFR into Adak and Atka, starting to slip on in to the Nikolsky area. Marginal VFR to the east, to the north there toward the Bering Strait. And IFR now, moisture flowing northward here, IFR all along the southern and eastern slopes of the Alaska Range, right on down into Shelikof Strait. And IFR continues North Gulf Coast and all of the coastal areas of the Panhandle. And then for the Wednesday morning outlook, IFR, central south coast of the southeast coast. That band extends right on up into its usual spot there, Prince William Sound. And more IFR here over the eastern slopes of the Alaska Range, southern slopes more over here to the east. And then marginal VFR right on up through the Yukon River Valley, over into the Yukon Flats, and all the Koyukuk Valley right up to the Brooks Range there. But North Slope VFR, marginal VFR for the eastern Arctic coast. And this elongating frontal boundary here pushing IFR into the western Alaska Peninsula and Unalaska Island up to about St. George, St. Paul to St. Matthew and St. Lawrence Island, marginal VFR, as is most of the Aleutians. And for the afternoon, this frontal system breaking up here, but still some IFR south of the Pribilofs, north of the eastern Aleutians, and either side of the Alaska Peninsula. VFR, Bristol Bay, right on up into Norton Sound and the Bering Strait. Areas of marginal VFR over the northern interior, areas of VFR farther to the south, and IFR still holds on to the North Gulf Coast into the northern Panhandle. Passes Anatuvik and Adigan, both looking at a VFR day tomorrow. Different story for the western Alaska Range. Lake Clark, Merrill, rainy, all expecting IFR conditions. And windy, starting out marginal but becoming IFR. And Isabel, looks like it'll be IFR the entire day, or at least most of it. Mentasta, more marginal there. And for Tanita, IFR might improve in the afternoon as the day wears on, could become marginal VFR. Portage IFR, and Chilcoot and White IFR. Freezing levels here, as you can see at the surface, across the Alaska Peninsula, up into the North Gulf Coast and the northern Panhandle, and 2,000 feet just barely making it up toward the western Aleutians. So moving on to the icing graphic here. Next system coming in out here to the west, pushing a pretty good band of considerable moderate rime icing right into the eastern Aleutians, exiting Adak and Atka there, kind of wrapping back in around from Kiska Island and the Shimiatu area. And then the other location for the best chance of some significant icing would be here for the southeast coast, right on up into the North Gulf Coast and along the Alaska Range there in the Kuskokwim Valley. Jet stream, we've got southwest winds at about 70 knots blowing across mostly the Queen Charlotte Islands there. Not too bad over the interior here at 33,000 feet. Northwest, 65 to 75 knots there, cutting across the Alaska Peninsula. Core of the jet, though, south of the Aleutians. 9,000 feet here with this low coming into the western Bering Sea. Southwest 45 knots here behind that front as it pushes eastward there across Adak and Atka. Then southeast 40 knots there, closer to the low center. Strongest winds, again, south of the chain. And southerly winds here, 55 knots, coming across the Alaska Range and toward the Tanana Valley. East 40, up over the eastern Brooks Range, North Slope area, as well as the Arctic coast. And 50-knot winds there west of the Queen Charlottes. 3,000 feet. Now we've got 50-knot winds here coming into southern Panhandle, and pretty brisk conditions all the way up into Prince William Sound. Call it 45 knots there at 3,000 feet. East 40 knots right along and just north of the Yukon River. 50 knots there around Point Lay to Cape Lisburne. falling back to 25 knots near Prudhoe Bay, and then looking at 45 knot winds with the front pushing into the central Aleutians. Turbulence, areas of moderate turbulence here. Northwest interior, western Arctic coast, again Point Lay to Point Hope, northern Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, just about all of the Aleutians into the western Alaska Peninsula. Expect, at least False Pass there, expect moderate turbulence, as well as the North Gulf Coast here into Turnagain Arm, Kenai Peninsula, and a fair portion of the southeast coast.